In episode 2, Mark got the okay to send Fred's remains to Gilead. He, along with Serena, hop on a plane and they go there. As soon as they arrive, they're greeted by Commander Lawrence and Nick, who is obviously now a commander. They get pleasantries out the way, but it is painfully awkward. Commander Lawrence does let her know that the Putnams will be hosting his wake. She then asks about the church where the ceremony will be held, and when they go there, she realizes it's really small. The thing is, they're trying to keep this funeral hush-hush because Commander Waterford is looked at as a traitor. When Serena questions both Nick and Lawrence on why the church is so small, they tell her that it's out of respect for her. But the good thing is he will still be buried where the other revolutionaries are buried. This, however, is completely unacceptable to Serena. She questions why somebody who helped found this country is being treated like this. And then she starts questioning how exactly he ended up dying because she knows that June Osborne could not have acted alone. She knows that these two had something to do with it, although there's plausible deniability, something that Lawrence is absolutely reveling in. He's playing dumb, but he's doing so in a way of a man who is all but admitting guilt, but also knows there's nothing she can do about it. Nick, on the other hand, is being more convincing with his denial. Serena then asks both of them, could you imagine what the other commanders would do if they found out that you helped a former handmaid kill her commander? I'm going to implore you to give Fred the burial that he deserves. Commander Lawrence, though, reminds her that he's just one commander, and Nick, while he's on the come-up, he's still very young. There's only so much that they can do. But she shoots back you'll find a way. They then get ready to head over to the wake at the Putnams, where they will be joined by a couple of handmaids, Janine and Esther. Janine is right back to being a follower of Aunt Lydia's. She knows how this game works. Esther, though, doesn't. And Esther kind of acts like Janine did when she first arrived. Esther has no interest in being a handmaid whatsoever. It's become obvious. So Aunt Lydia pulls Janine aside and tells her that the Putnams are looking for a new handmaid, and Esther fits that description. They're going to introduce Esther to the Putnams today, but it's up to Janine to kind of convince her to get on board with this whole thing. The incentive for Janine is the fact that Janine will be able to finally see her daughter again. And Janine also knows that if Esther is posted there, it'll give her a better chance of seeing her daughter even more in the future. So Janine tries to convince Esther to get on board with this whole Handmaid's Tale business. The handmaids then head over to the wake, where Serena's already arrived. She says hi to the other wives. They admire her baby bump. But eventually, Commander Lawrence pulls her aside and says, no go. I asked the other commanders, and they said no, mainly because they don't care what a woman thinks. Now, Mark doesn't hear any of this conversation. Even though he's supposed to be by Serena's side the entire time, he's pretty much kept in the entryway of the house. He does at one point get to see Nick, and he does want to talk to him, but this just isn't the right time to do so. That's actually when the handmaids arrive. Now that they're out of their barracks, Esther wants to do something, like escape, but Janine tells her everybody who tries to do something ends up dead. Your best bet is just to follow the rules. Esther then gets introduced to Mrs. Putnam, who makes comment on how young she looks, but Aunt Lydia does her best to sell Esther to the Putnam family. That's when Janine's daughter runs out. Janine gives her a big hug, says hello to her, but after a couple of minutes, Mrs. Putnam has the child go away, and Janine says to Mrs. Putnam, you have a lovely daughter. And Mrs. Putnam says, thank you. I thank the Lord for her every day. She looks like she's about to walk away, but then she turns back and says, I also thank the Lord for the people who brought her to me, acknowledging that Janine had a huge part in this. It makes Janine feel pretty good. It's now time, though, for Esther to meet Mr. Putnam. Aunt Lydia escorts her into the room with him and a bunch of other commanders, and when Aunt Lydia leaves, she has a look of guilt in her face because she has an idea of what might happen. And what ends up happening is Mr. Putnam feeds Esther some chocolate. On the surface, it doesn't sound that bad, but it's pretty demoralizing. The way he does it, it's just creepy, and it makes Esther feel the same. When she's finally able to get out of there and the handmaids leave, Esther turns to Janine and says, I don't want to be posted. But the only advice that Janine gives her is, be nice to your commander. You'll get pregnant faster that way, because being pregnant is your only protection. When they finally arrive back to the handmaid's barracks, Esther is able to get Janine alone. She comments on how difficult it must be to see her daughter and not be able to take her with her. And Janine says, yeah, you kind of get used to it. But it doesn't seem like Esther wants to get used to that. She then pulls out a bunch of chocolate that she stole from the Putnam household, and she offers some to Janine. The two women start eating the chocolate. Janine starts talking about what it's like to be pregnant, how much better you're treated, and then all of a sudden Esther says, I didn't like you when I first met you. And it turns out I was right. Janine's pretty confused, and Esther starts saying how Janine is using her, just like Aunt Lydia used her, and in reality, none of them care about her at all. They don't care about what she wants. Janine's just using all of this to get closer to her child. Janine right away says, no, that's not true. I'm trying to help you, just like June helped me. But Esther says, you are no June. All of a sudden, she starts coughing up blood, but she's doing so with a smile on her face. She says, I'm going to make June proud. And as Janine starts screaming for help, she too starts coughing up blood. Because whatever Esther did to that candy, it's got both of them coughing up a lot of blood. When Aunt Lydia eventually comes in, she's concerned because she's got two handmaids writhing on the ground with a face covered in blood and no answers in sight. But while Mr. Putnam's former handmaid and possibly his new one were dealing with that medical issue, he gets approached by Serena. He's in a room with all the other commanders when she just barges in. She makes a plea to all the commanders to honor her husband the way that she thinks he should be honored. Have a public funeral that's broadcast throughout the nation. Commander Putnam says, why would we do that for a traitor? And it's Commander Lawrence who comes to her defense by saying, I've watched you guys squander opportunities before, and I'm not going to let you do it again. The mourning of one of our peers is an opportunity that we cannot waste. Commander Putnam asks, how would that make us look? Honoring a traitor? And Nick pipes up and says, it would make us look merciful. Serena then leaves the men to discuss it. And a few hours later, Commander Lawrence comes and finds Serena and tells her, I was able to convince him. They're going to have a public funeral for Fred. It's going to be broadcast. And the way he was able to do that was basically because he's a man and she's a woman. The two then sit down and start talking about a guest list, and this gives Mark enough time to sneak off and have that meeting he wanted to have with Nick. They do so covertly in the woods, and Nick asks how June is, how Nicole is, and Mark gives him an update, but then says, there is a world where you could see your daughter. The way that you've been able to rise up through the ranks while also helping June, that's a skill. I know you got a complicated past, but America can be very forgiving. If you make amends and gain us some visibility and play your part for a while, this could work. I'd like to help you and your daughter. Really, we could help each other. And while Nick doesn't commit to anything, he does say, I'll keep it in mind. The next day, the funeral procession is held. But while Fred's funeral is going on up in Canada, June can't stop thinking about the fact that Serena knows it was her who killed Fred. She's not worried about it. She just can't get it out of her mind because she's proud of it. She then remembers, though, that she's got a gun in the car, so she runs and grabs it, and in the middle of the night, she buries it in the backyard. When everybody eventually does get up, her, Luke, Moira, Rita, they have a small get-together where Luke pulls out some board games, and one of them is Scrabble. It immediately triggers a memory of her playing Scrabble with Commander Waterford, so she gets pretty silent. And when Rita has to go in the kitchen to grab some bread, she uses it as an excuse to get out of the room. She starts telling Rita how Serena went off to the States, and she starts wondering what she's up to. She knows there's got to be an ulterior motive to this. The thing is, Rita doesn't really care. She doesn't want to talk about Serena, but June persists. She asks Rita, do you remember the time she hit you? I was pregnant and she wanted to hit me, but she couldn't, so instead she hit you. And all the while, Moira is trying to get June to shut up. Rita is telling June that she doesn't want to talk about it, but June just doesn't care. Until finally Rita says, I know I wasn't a handmaid, but I deal with what happened every single day. It causes June to realize what she's doing, and she apologizes, but the damage is done. It's too late. Something is clearly up with June. So later that day, Luke goes to check on her, and he asks, how are you doing? But she doesn't answer the question. She says, I do have something to tell you. Serena knows that I'm the one who killed Fred because I sent her his ring finger and I sent her his wedding ring. She starts talking about why Serena went to Gilead. There's got to be an ulterior motive. And Luke stops her and says, stop, you're obsessed. I mean, come on, you sent her his finger? He tells her, you know that that's not going to get Hannah back. And she says, yes, Luke, I know it's not going to get Hannah back. I'm fully aware of that. Luke realizes what a volatile situation his wife is in. So he gets close to her and says, you got to be here. You got to be here for me. You got to be here, Nicole. You got to be here for our family. Serena's gone. And she's probably terrified of you. She can't get to you. This little pep talk does help June. And the next day, the two head off on a day date to go to the ballet. They seem to have a good time, and as June is leaving, she kisses Luke. It seems like she's starting to feel like her old self until she looks up at the monitors in downtown Toronto, and all of them have the same thing on them. It's the funeral of Fred Waterford. You see Serena, you see the procession, and then you see one little girl get up and hand Serena flowers. And it's Hannah. Hannah is standing right next to Serena, and June is watching all of it go down. As June has a scowl on her face looking at the screen, Serena gives the faintest smile because she knows that somewhere June is watching this. And while June might have taken Fred from her, she is standing next to the thing that June cares about the most, her daughter. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel and subscribing to my Patreon. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. If you left a comment, I don't get back to you. I usually don't check the comments unless they're like a super comment. Also, if you don't see the next video up on the end screen, not to worry. It'll be up in a day or two.